Actually starting to stream now. Woo. Start the stream, get the recording going, sneeze first thing. Yeah, that's the right play. Catch the sneeze so it doesn't make a very loud noise. Yeah, okay. All right, here we go. I think we're going live. I'm going to have a link to drop in for you. Boom. All right, there we go. That's the link. Well, we're missing a couple bodies. What do we got? 3. We got about half. There's usually just a little latency because can't blame people for, you know, you can't be late all, as the teacher, you can't be late all the time. And then when you're finally on time, be all pissy because the students are like straggling in for the next 90 seconds or something. That's one of my kind of core life philosophies. So, oh man, but yeah, and in fact, I've got some questions for Braden, who posted a couple of things right at the very end. Well, right after, like, I think I bailed real fast just because this back just gets so bad after sitting for, an hour and 15. Still not up to it. Although I'm trying. I'm actually thinking about trying to acquire a stand-up desk, for the obvious reason, which is a little bit of a paradox because before the back surgery, I couldn't stand. I could only sit, and I couldn't stand, and I could not really walk much. Now I can actually walk and stand, but I can't sit. So, okay, I want to just start by wishing everybody a happy St. Patty's Day, and by pointing out that yes, you're probably asking, what is Chuck wearing today? And if you guessed, well, are any guesses what it is I'm wearing? I mean, the rest of it doesn't, it doesn't change much. You know what I mean? It's pretty much just turtles all the way down. But the key issue is kind of right here, and the general. Just curious if anybody knows what this is. Uh,
It
the
looks like a rugby uniform almost.
it is a rugby jersey, and it is in fact an official Irish national team jersey, which I acquired in Ireland, coolishly enough, uh, and I break it out. I mean, it's not the kind of thing, I don't know. I think it's a little weird and presumptuous to just wear, and you know what I mean, to wear an Irish. I mean, at my age, I guess, to wear an Irish national rugby team jersey around on a random day. But St. Patrick's Day, it is the most intensely Irish thing I have. So I throw it on, you know, every 17th of March, I bust it out, throw it on, see if it still fits. And then make claims about how I've never played rugby. So, but I can lie basically at that point because I think I wear it well. Um, so I just wanted to say from a design perspective, to me, this is a shiny object. I think that the design on this thing is just fantastic, my opinion. Not just that I'm just an amazing pseudo, Irish looking. I think I get past with decked out like this with the beard, with the, one of the nice things about white hair is that you can pretty much go anywhere, and the hair is not going to give you away as far as national origin. You know what I mean? The white hair is sort of generic at some level, but I think that I could pass for a you know retired Irish national rugby team player from the bygone years of 40 years earlier or something. Anyway, just wanted to share that with you. I do think this is a shiny object from a design perspective. I think it's really a nice looking layout. The shamrock, you know what I mean? I think it's great. I rip on the squeaking doors, do I not? So gotta also, when you find the shiny object, I think you gotta shout out to the shiny object. So, hey, I wanted to, oh, and I also wanted to draw your attention. to the memes of the day, uh, these are sort of like, to me, almost epitomizes dogs versus cats. And then, and they also, um, what is the, when your dog eats your philosophy homework, which I just really like. I don't know if I've used that one before. And then the cat down here, I like you, I kill you last. To me, this is just perfectly epitomizes the difference for me between dogs and cats. And your mileage may vary on that, but anyway, that just made me happy today. I wanted to go back to what Braden said at the end of class, which I class ends, right? And maybe even a couple minutes early, and I'm up. I got to get up on my feet and stand. In fact, I might today, while we're discussing stuff, like tip this back and stand up, just walk around, be standing when I don't have to be hands on the keyboard. I found in a meeting earlier today that if I could just do that, every so often, um, that it really did it just helped with stamina, with the pain, just the pain that I've got. That's kind of constant. Um, so Braden said right at the end, which I don't know if we talked a little bit about. Braden said Object A has tight coupling if it relies on methods of Object B, loose coupling if it doesn't. That's not quite right. And I want to clarify, really. Um, the better way to look at that, and I don't know, Braden, if we sort of like addressed it well enough in the discussion, that kind of, and then the meme, I don't even know that you're gonna have to explain it to me, okay? Because I don't know that I understand it. But before we get to that, before we get to the do you like spaghetti, um, and did you make that one, Braden?
No, I was hard pressed to find one at the end of class, so it
You
wasn't the best.
found that. Okay, now we definitely have to talk about it. No, here's the deal. There is an issue of dependency, okay? Like for example, if I rely on the methods of object B, if I'm object A um, and I rely on the methods of object B, that is coupling, right? We are coupling. I rely on the services, right? That's coupling for sure. But if I don't have to know much, and still use your method, you know what I mean? If I don't have to know much in order to use your method, then that's loose coupling. And if I have to know a lot about what's inside your structure in order to use your method, see what I mean? Then that's high coupling. So if I call the pizza joint and literally, or I'm on the pizza app, right?
That's
And
kind of what I meant.
is it? Well, because yeah, thing is that it's because you
I
always
realize my wording doesn't say that, but that's
totally fair,
kind of what I
totally fair.
meant.
Because really, it has to do with like deepening this idea about relying on. Because if I call, what's your favorite? I got to go Nico's because no other pizza place in the valley, as far as I can tell so far, merits mentioning as an example of a pizza place worth calling. If I call Nico's, um, I know some of the people. I know the owner. I know some of the manager, the main manager, and because I'm a regular, and and when I call Nico's, uh, I'll lead by saying, "Hey, this is Chuck. I just wanted to call ahead or something," or "Hey, this is Chuck. I've got a pickup." And in Nico's, on a cross section of probably at least a quarter of the employees and the owner and the managers, if I whoever answers the phone, if I say, "Hey, this is Chuck," I'm activating an attempt at activating a tighter level of coupling because they know me. You know what I mean? If they know me, then it can be like, hey, Chuck, this is, whoever, this is Ben. And I can be like, hey, Ben, hey, man, hey, I'm going to be rolling in here pretty soon. Are you guys pretty busy? And I can have a little exchange, you know what I mean? And it's a friendship. And the friendship is, friendships are almost more tightly coupled than casual, acquaintances, right? Or people you just meet at a little party, a little get together or whatever, right? Where you don't know much. the more you know and the more you sort of know, because remember the idea was information hiding, right? Modularity, the Parnas information hiding idea, right? That was the key. So if the information that should have been hidden is actually known, that's tighter coupling. If the information is as minimal as it can possibly be in order to still access the services, that is appropriately low coupling. And if I don't
So I'm
rely,
thinking of
and there's no coupling if I don't rely on you at all, right?
the duck adapter assignment from the Gang of Four.
Oh,
Is that a good example? As loose couplings
oh, is
when
it an
you
example?
adapt.
I don't remember. Um,
So
yeah, I
the
really don't
adapter
remember the
makes it so
details.
that you can the adapter makes it so you can turn a duck into a turkey, and the adapter will transfer all of the methods so that you don't have to actually like worry about
Yes,
whether they'll
yes,
transfer.
yeah. That is a great example of that attempt. High coupling is like the kind of thing where I think I told you about, where I had this code that I built. It was a few thousand lines of C, might have been Pascal, probably Pascal. This was back in the mid 80s. And, at but I had all these data structures in the .h file that everybody could see. And then there was some point where I realized I needed to change the data structure. Now, all the algorithm, all the parts where I'm like traversing it or putting stuff in, or everybody who went to go do stuff, like touched, imagine that people came into your pizza place and instead of just telling you, I'd like pepperoni pizza, you know what I mean, whatever, or I'd like the Nico's special, and then here's money, and that's it. Imagine that I went walking back into the kitchen. Imagine that everybody that came into the store walked into the kitchen and was like, I want that, and walking around, and that would be crazy high coupling. But the ancient days of imperative programming, assembly, all the algol derivative languages like Pascal and C. And then even until we got to object-oriented languages, there was that sort of entanglement with imperative languages where everybody walked around the kitchen to do what they were doing. Instead of just saying, I want a Nico special, here's the money, and I go sit down. That's low coupling, even though they're still coupling. And if I never go to that store, there's no coupling.
Hey,
That's,
Dr. K,
yeah.
what's your favorite thing to get at Nico's?
Okay, my go-to is the regular just sausage pizza. The medium is, there's a difference in the size in terms of how the ingredients combine. So, in my opinion, being a connoisseur, the personal versus the medium versus the large versus the extra large, the the best flavor is actually the medium. Isn't
That
that
makes
weird?
sense.
Right? Well, it's just a certain
That makes
ratio. It's
sense.
a ratio issue. You know what I mean? Of kind of how it tends to
Yeah,
go.
you're gonna have a certain amount of crust on different sizes of pizza and stuff like
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, yeah. And then here's the other thing. The other crazy go-to, the salad's amazing because they have this amazing house dressing. The house dressing is amazing. Then the other one is teriyaki chicken wings. Mm, with
Sorry for putting you off topic. Uh,
no, no, clearly it's
I've
a
been going past Nico's every once in a while and going, I wonder what he likes to get.
yeah, no, it's all good, man. I'm happy for the shout out, Um, did I tell you guys that in the original when Nico's first opened, I got to know the owner, the original Nick, um, the original founder of the pizzeria. And we did a thing where I was teaching some really large sections at BYU. I got a couple sections that were like 100 students each. And we would run a Chuck special where I would tell my students that if they just go into Nico's and they say, and all you had to do is say, Chuck sent me, then you got 10% off your order. And they would, and Nick was like, yeah, man, let's do it. So I just started spreading the word, and then they would get, they'd get what do you tell me? At least a dozen every week of Chuck specials. That's high coupling. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I just wanted to kind of clarify a little bit on that. And then with respect to cohesion, and just to reiterate, that cohesion has to do with the idea that the things that are in that object, the data that's in the object, belongs together. Okay. That's obviously subjective, right? That's obviously a judgment call. But otherwise, the problem is it becomes this kitchen, everything plus the kitchen sink, you know? You're throwing it all in there, and then it just becomes a mess. And then the clarity of this object becomes just more dicey, you know? Um, and then it's maybe better to kind of like split that so that so it's a cohesive idea for what this thing is, you know? Um,
Uh, I wanted to say about I guess it'd be less about cohesion, but more about coupling. That just from mostly from what we're talking about, it seems like an interface or the idea of an interface is almost the gold standard when it comes to coupling, because you don't need to have any specific knowledge of what's underneath. You just need a thing
but
that
Sam, you're
that has a
saying,
function.
just to interrupt, you're saying the like a user interface.
No, no, no. I'm saying like a Java interface.
Okay. All right. So then, yeah. So say it again.
So I'm saying that the idea of an interface seems almost like the gold standard when it comes to coupling. Like you know that it needs a thing, but you don't really care about what's as long as it has specific functions, you don't as long as it's that thing, you don't
Right.
care
I
about
don't
it
care
being
how
a
you
specific
implemented it.
thing.
That's exactly
You
right.
just want a type of thing, and you want to be able to flip it in and out if you need
That's
slightly
right.
different thing.
That's right. And I think another example, and it goes kind of along with that, is if you look at just any language, programming language, where there's support for polymorphism. Now, when you get into functional languages like ML or Haskell, but let's just take ML, which is probably my favorite functional language. Um, it's like natively polymorphic, right? I can literally just, create kind of a pattern. Like, if you give me a list, I can like sort the list. And I literally, my function that I write doesn't care what its types are, as long as the operation that I have to perform, like compare them or something, right, to figure out who goes first, as long as there's an overloaded operator that'll work with the type you give me, you see what I'm saying, right? I'm golden at that point. So my function just doesn't care. Then if I handed in a list of integers, a list of, strings, a list of anything, then my function is going to work the same. And the function itself, in a sense, has very low coupling to the data types because it's not dependent upon the data type to do what it does, so long as there's some plumbing underneath that's going to support it, right? Which I think is a very similar idea to this notion that I just don't care, right? What the details are in terms of implementation, and I do think that's pretty solid. Um, Let me jump. I think we got to here. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We did. Okay, I'm just gonna roll for a little while, and then maybe as always, jump in, chime in. And then I don't know, sometime before we're done, I want to just do a little more design of everyday things. Okay, if that's okay. Uh, just to kind of keep it a little light. As you know, I'm not super pressed on how fast we get through whatever. I want to just make sure that it's interesting, valuable for you guys, engaging for you, and when you walk away, there's some memorable things that kind of change the way you think about design. That's really my goal, right? Um, yeah. So we talked about this idea of objects, right, which are data plus methods. Very revolutionary idea in its day. And then the goal of low coupling and high cohesion, which is what we talked about. Now, here's the interesting thing. So that was this notion of programming, right? Encapsulation, abstract data types, object-oriented programming was built around this idea that I could program by making objects, that I could define the data structures, I could define the methods. That methods, the methods would have an invocation, a way of invoking those methods, which in sort of traditional puristic object-oriented programming we referred to as message passing. That was the original sort of terminology. And it's fair to think of them as method calls, you know what I mean? Much like a function call. But just understanding that a method is the term we use for the function, if you will, that's coupled with the data that I can, that has a very low coupling kind of interface. That, so I'll say things like sort yourself or delete the head. Like I could have like a stack or a list, right? Delete the head, delete the tail. I don't know what you are, how you organized all that. You know what I mean? You could have all the data in an actual linked list. You could have it in a freaking hash table. I don't care, right? How you did it. I'm just saying that whatever is the conceptual head of the list, delete it, or a stack, pop the top item, or whatever, right? I don't care about your internal implementation details, hence lower coupling, and that's good. But what was really interesting is relative to object-oriented programming is that once the programming showed up, which was embodied in a language, right? Like, well, the original object-oriented languages were Simula and Smalltalk. They were the very original object-oriented programming languages. Neither of them, became, some popularity, but neither of them became like unspeakably popular, like Java or C++ or Python. You know what I mean? But they were very, very influential and very, very important languages. Well, one of the things that happened was once we had these languages starting to arise, right? Once these ideas that Smalltalk and Simula had sort of embodied, then, and then of course, C++ starts to become a thing, Java becomes a thing, right? And then object-oriented begins to become mainstream. Then a bunch of object-oriented design methodologies began to spring up. Design methodologies have always existed, even when it was just the earliest days of imperative programming. There were design methodologies, how to design your data, various diagrams, data flow diagrams, and some of them, as we've talked about, were static in their notion. Some of them were dynamic, but those ideas have always existed because once you're going to start writing code, you have to be able to communicate design, right? And share those designs with somebody who doesn't understand code, or with somebody who's going to then convert that into code, and make some design decisions as they go. But one of the things that happened is that all of these design methodologies had their own notation to talk about. So class diagrams, they all look differently, okay? And then a couple of decades later, we talked a little bit about this, right? That they all converged into UML, which was really as much a corporate merger as it was a standards effort. A bit of a hybrid in a sense, because when I say corporate mergers, all of the individuals who had done the design things, who were kind of like at the table when UML was created, were people who had market share for their methodology and business interest in it. They were also typically academics / consultants, who were having influence, in a sense, altruistic influence. And and there were many methodologies that just simply got left out, that were not at the table when that all happened, right? So, but I think I told you a little bit about that story. And so that's really an interlude to remind me that if we didn't already talk about where UML came from, that was an opportunity to talk about where UML came from. So I want to hit a couple of other things that just relate, and some of this will be a little bit of review, but the fundamental object-oriented concept, right? There's a lot of things that we attach to OO that I don't think are inherently object-oriented, or if you want to think of it, use a different term, object-based, right? Polymorphism is not an object-oriented concept, you know? If anything, it's a functional programming concept. That's really where it started. You know, so anyway, the idea was that, and this is again just a reminder of these ideas, if they're in any way floating in your head and not really anchored down, that the definitions of an object we call classes, and the instantiation of those classes are the objects. Okay. And that is the fundamental idea. And the idea that we have, you know, what do we expect to see in a class diagram, right? Well, what is a class? It's a definition of an object. What does an object have? Well, an object has data and methods. That's the definition. And we probably need to have a name. So really at the end of the day, a class diagram only has to have a name, its properties, which are the data, and its operations, which are the methods. Dun, dun, da, 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 da. That's it. That's like, you know, the grand mystery resolved for you. This is also, just understand that there's always a relationship between the technique or the thing that the language gives you, okay, and what has to show up in the diagrams that you use to design those same features, right? The language gives you data and methods and the ability to give it a name. Well, what is the diagram going to give you? Same things. Oh, and you're going to go, well, but the language also gives me like private data versus public data, right, etc. Well, then you're like, okay, then the design has to also give you that. So there begins to be this relationship between the design methodology and the notation and language. Okay, there's always that, and I share that in part just to demystify it a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, where does it all come from? This UML, it just comes from, look, if you were just writing programs, literally, if you'd never heard of any of this, and the 14 of us just sat down one day and were just like, we need to be able to document this where other people can read it who aren't programmers. Well, we gotta talk about classes because we have classes, and what do they have in them? And you know what I mean? You would just be like, duh, and you're like, nah, 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 and that would be it. And then you have to just decide, what do we want the picture to look like? That would be it. You're like, I like boxes. The other one like, I like circles. Debate it. Pick one. And the good thing about what happened with UML is there had been a lot of methodologies, so you could kind of like see what was what had been tried. Okay. Yeah, UML just uses the term features to refer to all the things. Okay, let me just, here we go. There is a class diagram. Let me just look at this for a second. I'm gonna guess that's probably just a little, is that a little hard to read on the stream? Has to be.
Yeah, it's slightly out of focus, at least for me.
Yeah, I'm guessing, not shocked. But what I'm going to do, I want to just show you this as kind of a, blow it up and just give you like the one big view. This is again an example from Fowler. And the problem with all examples that we're going to ever talk about is simply the fact that you're not inside the system. You know what I mean? Even when you got a diagram, it doesn't always just call out to you what the thing is, right? But what I'm trying to do next, I'll show you. What I'm trying to do is, bust these out into chunks. Like there, for example, these are some things about it. See what I mean? I'm gonna break these out into little tinier chunks that'll be easier to see. Okay. So in the meantime, I just want to talk broadly about it without worrying about, double clicking on anything. Okay. Because honestly, it's not like this system, like I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this one so well from last semester, whenever. No, I don't remember it at all, so you and I are kind of on equal footing here. All right, but these are some reminders. And what's our time? How are we doing? 3 o'clock? It's been a half an hour. I'm going to tilt back. I'm going to stand up, okay? My audio is right here, so I should be. I'm also going to get to show off the entire Irish jersey, but I'll crank it up just a little bit and back up so you don't need to, just see all of my amazingness, but just so I can work the back just a little bit. So some ideas, okay? Is this like an intimidating posture or are we okay? It's really helpful. And by the way, I am shopping stand-up desks so that maybe before the semester's out, it'll be all normal, but I'll be standing to do it. The first bullet, the first remember, I want you to, man, if you could just like tattoo this on the inside of your eyelids so that you can see it when you close your eyes at night and dream. I care most about what this makes you think about from a design perspective. Okay. There's this, I need to find it. There's this ad that I have somewhere. I thought it was an ad for some language system. And there's this German Coast Guard station, and there's a younger guy who's there, and this call comes through, and he says, "This is the German Coast Guard," and then you hear sounds like either I can't remember. It seems like it was an American accent who goes,
What are you thinking about?
yeah, exactly. He
Sorry,
goes,
I
Mayday,
ruined
Mayday, we are
it.
sinking, we are sinking. And then the guy looks all kind of confused and he clicks the button. He goes, what are you thinking about? Right? Okay, that's I don't know, that's all I got, man. This is trying to help you remember this. What are you thinking about? So when you see these diagrams, just ask yourself, what are you thinking about? So yeah, you know the one, all right? I'll try to if you can find it and drop a link, that would be fab. But it's just so good. But what you're thinking about. Um, there we go. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Um, so the whole point is the point of design. Remember, it's all about what you're thinking about. These if I say here's a design methodology and it's a good one, and you take that on faith, it's a good design methodology. And then I say here's the features. Well, every one of those features, it tells you something that you should potentially be thinking about in your design. So if there's a little notation to tell you cardinality, like by the way, you see the little outside the boxes. Let me see if I can, like right there, that little star, and there's a one, this what they call multiplicity, right? There's a one, a star, right? Zero or one. Okay, that's called multiplicity. Some older systems refer to that as cardinality, but it just simply says how many of those can there be, right? So an order can only have one customer. A customer can have many orders. Just think about any online ordering system you use. You kind of know that that's true. Okay, so there's a thing called multiplicity. Well, what are you thinking about, right? What does that make you think about? Well, you ought to ask yourself, how many, how many of whatever can you have? You see what I mean? If it's a feature of the diagram, it's a thing you ought to be thinking about in design. Ta-da! And then the beautiful thing is, the reason that all that comes up is imagine that you're, kind of junior, because you guys are mostly junior from a kind of a industrial experience perspective, most of you. And someone says, "Hey, I need you to design this thing, whatever," and you're like, and you're like, oh, I can't tell them I don't know what I'm doing, and you're like, what are you gonna do? You need to design the system. And you're like, well, I kind of know how to code, kind of know how to think about it, but we need you to, what we're trying to do in 3450 is get you to think about design, right? And in my mind, that starts with use case design, right? That user facing design. But pretty soon it starts to come into implementation. So we shifted from use cases, which was about users, over to class diagrams, which are very much about implementation. If you're like, I don't know if my design is good, I don't know if I've done a good job of design, well, you would want to look at this. I would pull up UML. It doesn't matter if they need you to do it in UML. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you then turn around and draw it in UML. To me, the biggest value of UML is it makes you just kind of go, well, there are objects, and those objects have names, and they have data, and they have methods, and there are operations and attributes, and there are, you know, navigability and multiplicity and generalization, and you know what I mean. Every feature should kind of coach you on things you should have thought about while you were doing design. Does that make sense? And I think that's really important. And that's probably the number one value for me of these kinds of documents, these kinds of diagrams. Okay. There's another really good example I'm just going to throw out to illustrate this idea. In the world of software engineering cost estimation, there's a model, a classic model created by a guy by the name of Barry Beam, who was a professor. He's got to be retired by now. I haven't seen Barry. Since I left BYU. So, which is when I was kind of deeply in the research space and at the conferences. That was the last time I saw Barry. Anyway, a side note, gentleman, sweetest guy, really, really sweet guy. I was at a conference. It was probably 10 plus years ago. It was lunchtime, and I just happened to see that, I was just looking for a spot, and there was a spot over by just right next to Barry Beam. Everybody in this research, he was like a legend. This is when you've got a real class act. And I sat down across the table from him, and he looks up, and at that point he was probably already 70 or something, but he just looked up very sweetly and extended his hand, back when that was a thing, extends his hand across the table and just kind of goes, "Hi, I'm Barry. What's your name?" And I'm like, "I'm Chuck." And he's like, "It's really a pleasure to meet you." And then when he was like, "Hi, I'm Barry," I wanted to go, "Yeah, I know who you are." Everybody knows who you are. But he was just one of those very humble legends, you know what I mean? Legend in the field. Anyway, he built this cost estimation model that I think is still used by large institutions, like government, Department of Defense, big big project stuff. And the model was called the Kokomo, and it was a cost estimation, and it was sort of an algorithmic cost estimation. Anyway, point is, the Kokomo model itself had just pages of variables that you would try to estimate, and then they would all kind of pump into the formula, right? And when you were done, it would pop out, and it was basically, at some level, it was like a guess on magnitude of the project multiplied by a guess on a certain set of things, raised to the power of a guess of some other things that had an exponential effect on cost, right? So in essence, it was a guess times a guess raised to the power of a guess. So easy to mock, right? I mean, you could readily mock that if you, right? And say things like, "Well, love your model, Barry. It's just, a swag." You know what I mean? If you know what a swag is, before it was like stuff you got at a conference, right? There was you guys know these, do you know the terminology? It's WAG and swag. The WAG was a wild ass guess. That's what WAG stood for. Swag was a scientific wild ass guess. So really, Kokomo was sort of a swag. Okay. So what's the value? So what do you think? What's the value? Based on everything I've been saying, what do you think the value might be of doing this thing of why would I, and I'm never, ever, never did and never will use Kokomo to do a cost estimation.
Is it to identify elements that are relevant in finding the cost?
Yep, right? Who said that? I wasn't watching the light
Sam.
up. Sam. Yeah, man. No, right on. Yeah, it's like, look, I'm never going to plug it in. I'm never going to do a Department of Defense project, right? I'm never going to do that stuff. Why is it valuable? Because having read through and just having read, I've got Barry's book somewhere. In fact, hold tight because I'm going to keep talking, but I'm going to go look on my shelf down the hall in the library because I got sound is in my ear. But if I've never done any cost estimation of any kind, whether or not I'm going to, do Kokomo, which I almost certainly will never do, it's a very narrow market in which it becomes very important. But these are markets in which you spend, a couple $1 million just, doing the study to get the information to make the swag. Okay. Boom. So here's Barry's book. It's a legendary book in the field of software engineering. It's legendary right here. Okay. Software engineering economics. But if you look right here, I know it's probably really, really hard to read, but it's sort of like, I'll read you these labels. So it goes software cost driver attribute, software productivity range, and the items are language experience, schedule constraint, database size, turnaround time, virtual machine experience, virtual machine volatility, software tools, programming practices, storage constraints. And the entire book is basically just breaking out in great detail all of those ideas. So if all I ever did was read this cover and understood it, it would positively influence my ability to do cost estimation. You can see it, right? Okay, you understand that things like how experienced is your team, right? Is everybody senior? That actually probably has a function that goes up to a certain level of seniority and then actually hurts you because they can't think new thoughts, right? That's a factor. Have you built this kind of a thing before? If you have, it's going to be faster. If you haven't, it's going to be slower. All right, so how does that relate? It's just fun to talk about. This is very influential work, even though I've never read this book cover to cover, but I've referenced it. UML does the same thing for you when you think about design. Every type of UML diagram is another reminder of something that is available to you to think about. And if you didn't know anything like how do you do design, Dr. K says, grab Fowler's book and just start flipping through it. Oh, look, there's object diagram. Oh, look, there's this, interaction diagram. These are different ways if I thought about those aspects of the system. Remind you. The second big value is that you got to document it somewhere somehow. Often you wind up having to document stuff. So if you're going to document it, having a standard mechanism for documenting is really valuable. Okay. And so it does become a way of, like, again, if you're really small, if you're Ted and Fred in the shed, you got a really small company, and maybe it doesn't matter much. You whiteboard it and you just talk about it and you're sharing code all the time. Kind of a shared, collaborative, whatever. But in a much bigger company, there might need to be like an architectural buyout that looks at that and just goes, yeah, I really like that. I'll give you a little affirmation. Or a review with some people to look at this before you go code it to make sure we're kind of on the right track. And if they're like, whoa, what about, that are we, in our world, customers can only have one order. Or maybe that, you know what I mean? Maybe the multiplicity was wrong. When you catch it here, there's another principle of software design. which is bugs become more expensive as a function of time. Okay, can't remember who that was attributed to. But you see what I mean? What that means is that if I find a bug right here during design and I fix it, meaning I just change the number, then you go to code, the code is written to an accurate specification. If the code is, if it's allowed to all the way get through coding and testing and deployment, and now the customers can't do a thing that you could have fixed back during requirements or that you could have fixed during design. Far more expensive, right? When you're blowing customers for it than if you'd figured it out right here. A diagram like this could be used to do reviews or, kind of inspections. You know what code reviews are, where everyone sits down and looks at your code before you're allowed to check it in. Well, same thing. In a lot of companies, the process dictates that we document in UML or something like it. Yeah, it's not a bug, that's a feature. Whatever the standard is for your company needs to be the standard that everybody complies to, so that you've got a standard sort of lexicon, a standard notation that everybody can read. It lowers the barrier to entry for everybody. I hope that makes sense. And by the way, if there is a language war at your company, right? What's the true language? You come rolling in and you're like, this is so stupid. They do it with blah, blah, blah. And you're whatever you are. You're a Rust fanatic or whatever. It should be Rust. Coding standards, language wars, the coding standards. Yeah, everybody, they make us do frickin' camel case, or they make us do whatever. Look, whatever it is, you just got to pick one, because it does have to be uniform so that everybody, can have the same expectation. It lowers the barrier for you to do QA on things like documents even before there's code. That is really, really important. Really, really important. Okay. Yeah, where do you see this kind of stuff? Usually the bigger the company, the more of this there is, with lots of stakeholders. Who's the target audience? This is more technical, you know? So it's it's not end users, it's probably not non-technical shareholders, probably not. More technical. Fowler says this is a simple class diagram. What do you think? Agree or disagree? I'll tell you how I feel. What say you, friends?
I'm gonna say I disagree. I think, I mean, yeah, I don't want to see what he says is a complicated class diagram, because I don't know. I view complexity as being, sort of different categories of information, and there are a lot of
Interesting.
different categories of information going on right here.
Interesting. Okay. Others? Rick agrees that it's simple. I think there's arguments to be made, right? Just understand, I think there's a reasonable argument. And we talk about simple versus complex, that's a relative term, right?
I do want to say I think it's a reasonable class diagram, and it's probably a very effective class diagram, but I don't know that it's simple.
Yeah. My sense, and it really has to do with that relativistic sort of idea. My sense is that this is extremely simple, but it's only because I've seen some really ugly stuff. I've seen some really big stuff, because the class diagram isn't a diagram of only one class. That's very important. You know what I mean? It's also a diagram that deals with interactions between classes. So it's almost like an architectural diagram of the entire system viewed from the perspective of a class. You know what I mean? So that corporate customer and personal customer are both classes that inherit from customer. So customer has some stuff, and then corporate customer and personal customer add additional attributes. So they inherit all of that, then they add new stuff, and you know what I mean? Orders have relationships with other objects, with other classes, in other words, etc. But anyway, as is true with any system, getting lost is easy, and my recommendation is just take, like, it's really the same recommendation I give when I'm teaching 2810 and you're hitting the LC3 for the first time and there's all those, or circuitry or whatever, just calm down, take a deep breath, take a cleansing breath, and just kind of go, no, let me just pick one. Okay, there's an order. Okay, like ignore fuzz the rest of it in your head. Just like, okay, there's an order. Based on the location of that order in the diagram, it feels kind of important and I want to start there, right? And then I can see that orders have chunks within them that we'll call order lines, and that orders have customers associated with them. And very quickly, what seems sort of like fuzz your eyes and make you a little crazy suddenly is like, no, that makes a great deal of sense as you build a mental model, right, of in your head of kind of what this stuff is. It's just true of any notational system. Same with source code, right? You suddenly have to inherit somebody's code and you know maintain it, find the bug, whatever. You got to get inside. You got to build a mental model to try to understand it. The code tries to guide you. Well, UML diagrams try to guide you. Focus on the process that it sort of induces within you. Again, what you're thinking about. It should induce you to think certain thoughts. Remember the orders of ignorance? This becomes a framework. This class diagram becomes a framework. Frameworks are good at giving you the ability to create new questions. Same idea. Related to Sapir-Whorf, did we talk much about Sapir-Whorf?
I don't think we did
It
too much.
I definitely hit it whenever I'm doing 4450 because it's kind of that whole language paradigm idea. But Sapir-Whorf is sort of this idea that our language and our thoughts are very, there's a resonance, they're interrelated. And there's kind of this shows up in the movie, what's the movie? Arrival? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they literally say Sapir-Whorf in the movie Arrival. So Sapir and Whorf were just two researchers. Sapir was the senior researcher. Benjamin Whorf, he goes on to become an officer on the Starship Enterprise. But Edward Sapir was the first teacher. Whorf was the student, Benjamin Whorf. And they kind of worked on this idea, which was really more Whorf than Sapir, but they both were very much aligned with this idea that language and thought were very interrelated. And there's a hard version and a soft version. The hard version is no language, no thought, right? That you can't have the thought without the language. That's backed up if you read things like the autobiography of Helen Keller, who talks about the world itself being kind of like this void without form until she had language. And the more soft version says it's not quite that stiff, but there's clearly influence. And I think it's very easy to accept a soft version of Sapir-Whorf, right? For example, if you have, like a lot of you will do like, we make you do calculus. Why do we do that? You're like, I have no friggin' idea. Well, and you'll hear people say, and I think it's a very naive viewpoint, frankly. They'll say things like, I've never used calculus in my life. It was worthless. Why did I'm never going to use this. Well, unless you go to work for NASA and you're programming, whatever you're doing, heavy physics or whatever. Although those then will often become physics majors who become programmers, right? Because they're first and foremost, physicists. It's not an uncommon destination career-wise for those that major in physics to eventually be programmers. Um, all right. So what am I getting at? Um, so it's a harder sell, the hard version, that no language, no thought. That's a little dicey, because where did the language come from in the first place, if not a thought that needed a term to attach to it, which then embodied the idea, which then equipped. I was talking about calculus, and if you have had calculus and you understand it at any level, you have used it, and you maybe never didn't, never solved double integrals on polar coordinates. Fine, but if you understood, for example, the limit of a function, you know, or deltas, or the area under a curve, or just these ideas that, whether you ever remember any of the equations or anything, there are ideas that influence the way we think. And when you've had all this computer science and all that math and all that stuff, it equips your brain to think thoughts that, if you've never had any of that, it's very difficult. And a lot of times, if you've known people, which pretty much everybody does, where it's really, really hard to have an intelligent conversation, a lot of times, if you think about it, there's a lack of vocabulary with which to have the analysis. The thinking is not fine grained, it's very coarse grained. I remember this old guy once who said to me, in my opinion, there's good and there's bad, and there's no in between. This is literally his position. Good is good. He would say, good is good and bad is bad, and there's no in between. And I remember just being like, wow, what a blessed state to live in that kind of a black and white world. I unfortunately lack the simplistic confidence to just, what I mean? Slice and dice, baby.
Probably miserable to be around him, though.
Can be, these people tend to get really opinionated about really arbitrary things, like everything becomes a moral issue because everything's either good or bad. And then that's just like, well, that's just you just like to do your hair that way, or I don't like it, but you can, and that's okay. It leads to a lot of really weird, right, reactionary kinds of things, ways of experiencing the world. Point just being that the things we study, they do influence the way we think about the world. In large or small ways, they do. And for me, with calculus, the limit of the function is a great one, right? The limit of the function, it says, while n is really small, while the numbers are really small, you got this curve, and you really can't tell who's, out of the chute. For a little while, they look the same. Then you look over, fast forward, move down the graph, and all of a sudden, they're doing this. If I take the limit of the function, right, I now can understand better what they do in the end, right? Because I just understand that little bit. I don't need to remember what the formula for a what I remember. Don't care, a parabola, or a hyperbola. I don't need to remember, but the notion of like an asymptote, right? First of all, you can call people that, and they get offended, and they don't realize you're calling them an actually unapplicable mathematical term, or something asymptotic. What does that really mean, right? Right? It just keeps getting closer and closer, but never quite arrives. Is there analog for that just in our lives in the real world? Yeah, yeah, all the time. So I'm just saying, that like the limit of the function. Okay, one last thing. Some of this is very 305G-ish for those, in 305G with me, but limit of the function. If everybody acted like you, what would the world be like? That's the limit of the function at some level, right? As n approaches everyone, and n is you know, it's your behavior, and as n approaches everyone. So if you just punch everyone in the face that you disagree with, and everybody does that, that's a principle that you learn in calculus called the limit of a function. Yeah. Or if you're just really nice and lifting of everybody, and if everybody acted like that, then you can use that to kind of gauge. Like I like the be nice to everybody, or the figure out how to lift people as humans and not denigrate everybody and punch them in the face. And the people who do the punch me in the face, they probably never had calculus, or they didn't do well. They didn't. They didn't pass. I don't know. Does that make sense? That makes sense. So the Sapir-Whorf really just is there to kind of say it gives you notation that maybe you never thought about before, right? Yeah, tell him, Braden. Tell him Dr. K sent. You're like Dr. K sent me. No, what was it? Wasn't there a set? There was an SNL, the face punch thing. The SNL. Okay, Braden or somebody, can you go find just cause the SNL face punch with the Foo Fighters? Somebody find that. I know you can find it and drop a link because I just need to watch it again and I don't want to look it up later. It's that, right? It's that. What's the guy's name? What's the guy's name? Uh, there was a phase of SNL where I really didn't watch when it was live,
Is that
and
Will Forte? Maybe.
I don't know. Doesn't sound right. I think I would know the name. Anyway, it was the still it was
That's
this.
Andy Samberg.
That's Andy Samberg. Thank you. Yeah. Why was I blanking on that? Yeah, it was Andy Samberg with the face punch. I don't remember what they called it. The guy who runs around punching everybody. But there's one. I want the Foo Fighters. Okay, punch in the face with the Foo Fighters. Um, somebody come up with that. Okay. Anyway, that's why Sapir-Whorf shows up. There we go. Thank you. Uh, let's see. Is that the one with Foo Fighters in it? Let me see. Hang on a second. I'm looking real quick. Yeah. It shows up at about 44 seconds, 45 seconds. Taylor Hawkins. Yeah, they're in a cafeteria. Taylor Hawkins and Dave Grohl sit down, and then Sandberg comes rolling in and punches them. Yeah, they're about 20 seconds worth. Thank you very much, Braden, for finding that. You made my day. Oh, anyway, that's why Sapir-Whorf. Okay, the language gives us vocabulary, gives us framework. It all ties together. Sapir-Whorf, the orders of ignorance. It all ties together. Oh yeah, it's all coming together. All right. So now we're going to actually bust out class diagrams. This is kind of where it gets boring, honestly, for me. And for some of you, you're like, some of you have this like comfort zone when we get off the philosophy and get to something concrete, you're like, oh, I'm happy now. And I'm really more the opposite. I can drill down and do all that stuff, fine. But it's more the philosophical conversation is far more interesting to me. Um, if you haven't figured that out already. Yeah. So I want to just hit a couple points in here, and then maybe make sure that next time, I guess, which will be what next week. Is today Wednesday? You know how I never remember that this class is not a Tuesday Thursday class, so it'll be Monday. And we don't stand a snowball's chance in hell of actually finishing this by Monday. But I just want we're going to jump in and quickly walk through all the little UML chunkies, and it'll be like okay, and I want you to just have the thoughts. Okay, that's the main thing. So what I'd rather do is pause right here, like I said I was going to, with 10 minutes left, and get out of this one. Can we do a little more design of everyday things? Because to me that's just pure sandbox time when we get to do a little bit of that.
Yeah, I did want to ask though, and you may be annoyed with me for waiting this long, but I didn't want everybody to hate me. But
Oh,
do
way
you
to
know
go,
when we're going
Sam.
to do the
The
midterm?
midterm, we were supposed to do review. You guys should have reminded me.
But, oh, that's why I said you'd be upset with me, but my classmates would.
I cannot be upset with you, Sam, okay? It's not possible. Besides, this was good to get through, and then it can be on the exam, so no,
Oh no, what
what
did
should
I
we do?
do?
What should we do? I gotta put it, I'm gonna like stick this on my forehead. You gotta know, I just barely got off all my pain meds like 3 days ago. So I am coming into lucidity at this stage. So let's just go next week, exam week. How about that? Next week is exam week. Where's my dadgum marking utensils? No, yeah, no, Sam, I think it's cool. Yeah, Rick. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do, Rick. You're delusional, man. Okay, I'm making the big note to myself. So next week, which will be the 22nd and the 24th. So March 22nd is going to be review. Cool. And March 24th, let's just take it off. It's not going to hurt any of us. And that basically buys you some time to spend on it, on doing it. It'll be online on Canvas. And it's still intending to have you study it and review it and know stuff. And I don't know if we're going to turn on proctologist, but we do need to do something where it's kind of honor system about, it's stuff I want you to have latched onto at least a little bit, you know what I mean, for a period of time, even if it fades a little bit afterwards. Um, okay. Okay, here we go. Here we go. It's going right here. It's on my board right in front of my face. Okay, yeah, Sam. I I for one appreciate your loyalty to your classmates. I do. I respect it. I nothing but respect. Because honestly, this is onus on me as the old guy in the room. You know what I mean? To try to remember this crap. Which clearly I have not been. So yeah, I'm with you, Scott, on note of the proctologist. But let's see.
I think a reasonable uh, intermediate is having like an honor statement or something else. Like I know if people are going to cheat, like they can trick Proctorio too.
That's also
If
true.
you,
That's true.
yeah, I mean, it definitely makes it harder, but you you can get away with some shenanigans without tripping the centers, and
Yeah.
you don't want to sit there and look through all the footage to make. But really, when it comes down to it, it's a about who you kind of are as a person and who you want to
I
be as a
No, I'm
person.
totally
And
with you. Totally with you. Besides the fact that even with attendance and everything that we've been doing, there's literally nothing stopping any of you ever to this point, even of like jump on Discord, go to the hot tub in your apartment complex, whatever. You know what I mean? And get nothing out of it. Nothing stopping anybody from any of that anyway. And and I think that my own opinion here is that I try really, really hard to not do anything that's just really arbitrary. You know what I mean? Like jump through some hoops, whatever. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, yeah, no, Rick, that is exactly what I mean. That's what that was deliberate. I just think Proctorio is the worst named product ever because it does conjure up proctologist, which feels a bit invasive if you know what I mean. That's the struggle I have with it, frankly.
It made me
But
think
no,
of
I'm
like vintage Marvel superheroes.
oh the proctologist. Was he like an
No,
was
no,
he?
no. Proctorio sounds like an
Oh,
X-Men or something.
Proctorio. I was going to say that proctologist also sounds like a
yeah,
possible
but
superhero. No, Proctorio does, right? Or a villain. Not quite sure who's the superhero and who's the villain, but yeah. Yeah, Eric. No, anyway, no, but whoever was saying, I think it was Sam. Uh, Right with you, right with you. It really is that thing, and I'll probably, I think, adding a little statement that just goes, um, I promised this, I did this thing. This is closed book, closed notes, and I'm, kind of signing my name right here. It says that here's my word of honor. Whatever you want to break that word of honor, you got the struggle of having to go be you afterwards. You know, that's that's a little harsh. I'll grant that, but it is still on point, right? So I like that. I like that. Let's see if we can do that. Okay, yeah. Do you do the hot tub, Eric? There's nothing wrong with it as long as you don't drop your phone. I mean, you know what I'm trying to say. Okay, I want to just do a couple
Well,
quick things. Yeah, go.
I don't do it every time, but I live at my
Uh,
in-laws right now, and they have a hot tub and a pool just outside the back door. And since the back door is the front door for the apartment that I'm living in, uh, my
okay.
Wi-Fi reaches out to the hot tub
Yeah,
very
I'm
easily.
buying. Oh, you don't think I would lecture from a hot tub if I could pull it off? Are you kidding me? My back wouldn't hurt as much. I guarantee you that. Speaking of which, it sounds really good right now, and I don't have one, but
Sorry.
I'll figure something out, man. No, only jealousy here. Okay, let's hit a couple of things just for 4 minutes. Okay. Um, all right, a little more design of everyday thing. This, by the way, is just my favorite. Okay, just scout it for a second. Just scout it. What's the problem? Right?
I'm not ashamed of how much that made me laugh.
I also am not. I'm so unashamed. I'm pushing it out for everybody. Right? Because the stakeholders are just that's so common that there are stakeholders that just don't get it. That they're not the target audience, but that there really are. I remember once we were pitching some investment stuff related to Kinpoint and which is kind of related to the Take a Name app, but not directly to somebody that I don't know how much money they had, but a lot. But they had like their own staff of people doing genealogy, and we're trying to talk about this thing that we're doing with this app, with this product, and where we go. And I just remember this guy just being like, "Well, I've got all these people doing that for me. Why would I need this app?" And we're like, "You wouldn't." So okay, when you're the 1/10 of 1/10 of 1% who has a staff of people, if you have that kind of money and that kind of interest, it's like, look, can you understand that there is a user that views this dynamic could not separate? I just don't see why I would want this. What, you thought we were here to sell you an annual subscription for $100? Is that why you thought we had this meeting? Maybe we wanted, $10 million, for for a round of investment so we could do something for this other group of people that aren't you. Could not separate, couldn't separate. So that's again empathy, right? Getting outside of yourself. What else? This was a good one, and I'm just going to go, by the way. We got like a minute, so I just want to hit this. This was, you might recognize this or maybe you don't, but this is a view that I get. But just look at the interface for a second. It says select course reference number, CRN. Please enter. Now, okay, this is a direct screenshot, all right? Please enter. So select, enter the CRN you wish to access. Am I accessing the CRN, or am I accessing a course, or am I accessing information about a course? Or select a different term from the menu. The menu
It
doesn't
seems like
have it.
you also can't enter anything. It's a drop-down
It's a
menu.
drop-down menu. That's right. It's a drop-down menu. Then over here it goes CRN. So we've gone CRN, full name, CRN, CRN, and then in the dropdown, this is our class, Principles and Patterns of Software Design. 26029. Now, is that the CRN? Now, when I actually get to the part that I'm pretty sure is the CRN, because why isn't 3450 the reference number? Right? I don't know, right? Maybe I know, maybe I don't. But back to that design principle, don't make the user have to know all the things to do, right? That's high coupling. Same principle, high coupling. And then I can do this little drop down, make sure it's there, and then I say submit. This is just a mess. It's really a mess. And it's doing so little and so extraordinarily badly. Here's another one. I'm going to end on this one. We can just come back to it. We're out of time. This was, I was helping my father-in-law trying to just get some stuff on this old Windows machine. He was 85 at the time and in poor health. Okay, destination path too long. Can I see what it is? No, I don't know what it is. I guess there was more details maybe. The file name or names would be too long, for the destination folder. What does that even mean? I don't even know. And I'm 85, so I don't even know. You can shorten the file name and try again. How should I do that? What might I do to shorten said file name? Try a location that is a shorter path. Well, you know, it's all like this bizarre, cryptic, you know? And what's a path? And what's a destination? You know, the whole thing. This is that was an actual this was an actual screenshot. So I out of time. So I gotta stop just because although honestly that 10 minutes or whatever that I spent standing up, 15, really helped. So that's a good discovery on my part of a way to get through because normally by this phase of the game I'm in so much pain. So I think that's my new go-to for meeting survival. So all right, everybody. Keep cranking on the stuff. We'll do a review on Monday. Whatever time we've got left, we'll do more class diagrams. And then we'll just take off Wednesday so you guys have a little extra time for exam time. And then we'll meet back again the following week. At that point, I think it'll only be 5 weeks left. Yes. Yes. I want this summer so badly. And so do you. But especially me. Okay? All right. All right. Again, happy St. Patty's to everybody. And hang tight, be good, succeed, do all the good things. I'm going to shut this thing down right now.
Thanks. See you Monday.
Yep. See ya.